What's up? It's J Wade 2 here with your first revelation for this week. We're going to continue with the Who Are You series, I guess, part 3. Last week, we talked about who we are in God. We talked about the fall of man. First week, we said that we were created in his image, in God's image, and in God's likeness, and that we've been given dominion and authority on earth. Last week, we said that we're flawed, we fall, but we're still favored, because even though Adam and Eve fell, God did bring down punishment, but he did not take away their favor. This week, we're going to look at Joseph, and Joseph is an interesting character. The account of Joseph goes on in astonishing 14 chapters in Genesis, and I believe the only person that's talked about that much is Jesus in the Bible. So Joseph is a very, very important character in the Bible, and his account is very important. And in order for us to really learn who we are in God, I believe it's important to talk about Joseph. Now, I'm not going to go through all 14 chapters, but I will talk about his life and how it relates to us. Just like I said last week, we're favored. God favors us. And with that favor comes special things. And when God favors us, he endows us. In other words, he gifts us. He gives us a gift that he intends to use for his glory. He gives us a gift that he intends us to use to fulfill our purpose for creation. And that purpose, as we know, leads to our destiny. So us being favored by God equips us with an endowment, a gift. That endowment for Joseph was the ability to dream and interpret dreams. And Joseph's whole purpose was tied to his gift, the gift that he had to interpret dreams. And we all have a gift. God has gifted all of us because we're favored. And because we're favored, we are endowed. And we are endowed with a gift that God intends to use for his glory, our purpose, and our destiny. All of us are endowed with the gift. And Joseph was endowed with the gift to interpret dreams. Brothers and sisters, your gift, no matter what it may be, you know what your gift is. You know what you're good at. You know what you've been put on this earth to do if you listen to God and allow him to explain to you what he wants you to do. When you hear God and he reveals your purpose is tied to the endowment that he's given you, the gift that he's given you. And the thing about being endowed with this gift is Satan doesn't like it. The enemy does not want you, first of all, he doesn't want you to use your gifts for God's glory, because he wants the glory. And a lot of people get caught up using their gifts for their own glory or for the adulation of others. And when we do that, all we're doing is using our gift to give Satan the glory that belongs to God. Even if we're doing it to bring ourselves glory, we're still bringing glory to Satan instead of bringing glory to God. So God endows us with these gifts so that we can use them for his glory, our purpose, and to reach our destiny. Joseph had the same thing happen to him. He had a gift. He was endowed. He was favored. As a matter of fact, he was so favored that his dad favored him over all of his other brothers. And his other brothers didn't appreciate that. He was given a coat of many colors. We all know the account. We've all heard the sermons about the coat. We've all heard of Here Comes the Dreamer. We've all heard about this. And they were so filled with envy that they decided that they were going to get rid of Joseph. They didn't kill him. They made it seem like he was dead, but they didn't kill him. They sold him off. And Joseph was sent off as a slave. Brothers and sisters, the enemy does not appreciate your gift. The enemy wants to destroy you, and the best way to destroy you is to destroy your gift. Brothers and sisters, we are endowed. We're favored, and because we're favored, we're endowed with gifts. But sometimes those endowments that we have, you know, it may be singing, it may be preaching, it may be whatever you do that's well. Somebody else doesn't like it. So yes, we're endowed, but yes, we're envied as well. And that envy can take on many different forms. And that envy can derail you. And that envy comes directly from the enemy. Because the enemy, all he wants is God's glory. All he wants is for you to do the opposite of what God wants you to do. And if he can disturb and wrinkle up and rip up your gift, your endowment, if he can do that, he knows that he can get glory that belongs to God. So your endowment will be envied. So we're endowed, and because we're endowed, we're envied. Brothers and sisters, a lot of the things that is said about us and a lot of the things that we go through is all out of envy. And it may not look that way. People may not think that's what it is, but that's what it is. When you're endowed, there's no doubt that you're going to be envied. People say all the time, you know, the reason you're talking about me is because I'm on your mind. And you don't talk about somebody that's doing less than you. You talk about somebody that's doing what you're not doing. I've heard that one too. But our endowment brings on envy. You're going to be envied. Brothers and sisters, don't be deterred by envy. Your endowment is bigger than any envy. And when you submit and fall into the envious thoughts and deeds of others, and especially Satan, you negate your endowment. And it's impossible to do what you're supposed to do. It's impossible to be on purpose. It's impossible to reach your destiny when you negate your endowment. And envy plays a big part in us negating our endowment. We can't bow to that. We can't be worried about that. We have to continue on our path, even though we're envied. Brothers and sisters, don't worry about people talking about you. They're going to talk about you. They talked about Jesus. I say this all the time. They talked about Jesus. They didn't understand him, and they envied him. The preachers of that day, the synagogue leaders, the elders, all of those guys that claimed to be so religious and had so much spiritual and biblical knowledge, they were envious of Jesus because of his endowment. He was the word. He didn't just know the word. He didn't just preach the word. He was the word. He was endowed with knowing with who he is. And they were envious of him. They were envious of Joseph. They're envious of you. So take that as a badge of honor and move on and do what God called you to do, even though you're envied. Because you're going to be. Anyone that's endowed is going to be envied. Anyone that's favored and endowed will be envied. So his brothers envied him and threw him away. He was cast off as a slave. But his endowment, that gift that God gifted him with because he was favored, his endowment got him to another position. That endowment, even though he was sent as a slave, he ended up being the headmaster of Potiphar's house. He was in charge of the entire house. Because of his endowment, he was in charge of the entire house. And when he got control of the entire house, that ruffled Satan's feathers again. Said, look, he's been a slave. And now here he is, the house master for Potiphar. So Satan gets in Potiphar's wife and gets Joseph in trouble. Brothers and sisters, Satan doesn't just stop at one trick. He continues to try to trip you up, especially when you're endowed, especially when you know your endowment and you use it for the purpose that God has given you. He will always try to continue to trip you up. And that's based on that envy. Even Satan is the author of envy, because he was so envious of the praise that God was getting from the angels that he rebelled against God and got banned from heaven. So that envious spirit, Satan is the author of that. And he's going to continue to come at you because he's so envious at your endowment. You're endowed and you're envied. Joseph gets sent to jail. And in jail, he uses his endowment once more. Now, all of these things that Joseph has gone through was part of his purpose and his journey towards his destiny. And I stopped here to say this. Brothers and sisters, every pothole, every pitfall, every setback, everything that happens when you're in the will of God and you're living out your purpose through your endowment, every pitfall, everything you go through is just the journey that it takes for you to get to your destiny. God didn't say that every day was going to be happy, happy, joy, joy. God didn't say that every day was going to look like you're progressing towards your destiny, even though you are. He didn't say every day was going to look like that, because there's some days where you doubt your destiny, even though you're favored, even though you have an endowment. Sometimes it seems as though you're not moving towards your destiny because of the pitfalls, because of the envy, because of things that happen. But brothers and sisters, you're favored, you're endowed, yes, you're envied. But in jail, Joseph uses his endowment. And brothers and sisters, that's a lesson for us. We are endowed with special gifts from God because we're favored. And whatever situation we're in, we should use what God has endowed us with. No matter what the situation is, use what God has endowed you with. Because some of us, we get distracted, and that envious Satan gets on us, and we feel that we're too good to use our gifts in certain places. Now, what if Joseph had a thought, I'm too good, God has favored me too much to use my gifts in this prison? What if he had thought that? Brothers and sisters, we have to decide in our hearts that no matter where we are, no matter what situation God allows me to be in, if I'm in his will and I'm living on purpose and I'm headed towards my destiny, whatever situation he puts you in, you should use your endowment. I don't care where you've been. For some people, especially wrestlers, I know about wrestling. And wrestlers, once they've been to the WWE, They have a hard time if they have to step down a few levels and use their gift somewhere else. They have a hard time with that. They don't want to do that. Some of them commit suicide. Some of them get on drugs because they miss that mountaintop atmosphere of the WWE. A lot of us can lose our endowments because we feel that we are above where we are right now. But the bottom line is, brothers and sisters, no matter where you are, no matter what position you're in, even if it's a step down from where you've been, God has you there for a purpose, and he wants you to use what he's endowed you with in that place. Joseph used his endowment in prison. And because he used his endowment in prison, that place he was, because Satan envied his endowment, he used it there. And because of that, he was elevated. And he was put in the biggest position that he ever had. Brothers and sisters, there are levels to this. You know, people say that all the time, there's levels to this. And most of the time they're thinking of a staircase that continuously goes up. But brothers and sisters, the levels are sometimes different from that. Sometimes it's here, then here, then here, then here, then there. We don't know what the route is to our destiny, but we ought to know that God is with us. That's what Genesis 39:2 says. And the Lord was with Joseph. And that's the crux of the entire matter. You're favored and God is with you. So let's look at this. We're favored, so we're endowed. We're endowed with special gifts from God. And because of those gifts, sometimes, all the time, we're envied. And things can happen to us. Sometimes we don't understand where we are, but God has a plan and a purpose. It doesn't always go the way we want it to go. Even though we're endowed, even though we're walking on purpose, even though God is with us, it doesn't always seem like we're going in the right direction. But brothers and sisters, rest assured, God is with you. He loves you. He favors you. He's endowed you. And even though we're endowed, we are envied. But even though we're envied, he will elevate us. We're elevated. And the thing about this is, from the outside looking in, it looks like Joseph's elevation took place as he left prison. But I believe Joseph's elevation took place as a slave. I believe Joseph's elevation took place in prison because he used what God gave him. He did all that he can do, and God did the elevating. So brothers and sisters, no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through, if you know that you're in the will of God, you're living on purpose, you're headed towards your destiny, the Lord is with you, know that because of his presence, you're elevated. The elevation didn't happen for Joseph at the end of the story. The elevation happened for Joseph, chapter 39, verse 2. And the Lord was with Joseph. That's all the elevation that we need. So we are favored, yes, from last week. But this week we're in power. We are endowed. We're envied. But we're also elevated. But the thing about it is, this is what I love about it. Because of the presence of God, we're elevated. But because of that elevation, we are empowered. And at the end of Joseph's story, it all comes full circle. It all comes full circle. His brothers and all of the dreams that he told them, they came true. And he was empowered to help his people. Brothers and sisters, that's our goal. Believe it or not, that's your destiny. Your destiny is to use your endowment on purpose to reach your destiny. And your destiny is to help God's people get to where he wants them to be. That's your destiny. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. But he will empower you to do that because he's with you. He's elevated you and he's empowered you. So let's look at what we are. Let's look at what we are, and then we're gonna stop until next week. So we learned through Adam and Eve that we were created in the image and likeness of God. This is who we are in God. We're created in God's image and in God's likeness. He's given us dominion and authority over everything on earth. We know through the fall of Adam and Eve that we are fractured. We fall, but we're favored. We know because of the fall that we are flawed, that we fall, but we're favored. And because we're favored, like Joseph this week, we're endowed with special gifts from God to be used on purpose to reach our destiny. We're endowed, but we're also envied. So don't think it's strange when envy shows up. We're envied, but we're also elevated because God is with us. When we're in his will, living on purpose, marching towards our destiny, he is with us, and that elevates us. And that elevation calls us to be empowered. And when we're empowered to help our people get to where God wants them to be. We're empowered to bless people. God blesses those that he can get a blessing through. And God has given you the gifts that you have to use them in order to elevate his people, to bless his people. So one more time, recap, then we're done. We're created in God's image and in his likeness. We have dominion and authority over everything on earth. We are, this word keeps escaping me, but we're flawed. We fall. We're favored. We're endowed. We're envied. We're elevated. And we're empowered. God bless you. I love you. See you next week.